In the glittering spires of Zephyria Prime, where arrogance shone brighter than wisdom, the Galactic Alliance laughed off the warnings. Primitive species cried of a creeping darkness, of a threat that swallowed stars whole. But the Alliance mocked them, blind in their comfort. Then came the silence. Entire fleets vanished. Systems went dark. And when the highborn elites finally begged for salvation, it wasn't their shining fleets that answered. It was the Deathworlders, forged in fire, tempered by chaos, driven not by conquest, but by the instinct to survive. This is the story of humanity's reckoning and the galaxy's awakening. The Galactic Alliance's arrogance, the crystal spires of Zephyria Prime reached toward the heavens like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 distant suns in brilliant rainbow cascades. Within the grandest tower, the Galactic Alliance Council gathered for their monthly assembly, representatives from dozens of advanced civilizations taking their places in the circular chamber that floated weightlessly above the city. Chancellor Velthok stood at the center podium, his crystalline form shimmering with inner light as he addressed the assembled delegates. This Zephyrian leader had governed the Alliance for over 2 centuries, his people having achieved technological transcendence when most species were still discovering fire. Around him, the council members represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. The Mantarians with their precisely calculated movements and compound eyes that could perceive 17 different spectrums of light, the Etherians who existed as pure energy within containment fields, and the Aquarians whose water-filled environmental suits allowed them to participate in terrestrial politics. Esteemed colleagues, Velthok began, his voice resonating through the chamber like musical chimes. Today we address reports from the Outer Rim territories regarding some alleged threat they have termed the Void Swarm. I have reviewed these communications, and I must say the level of hysteria displayed by these peripheral worlds is most concerning. Admiral Crixus of the Mantarian Defense Corps shifted in his hovering command chair, his segmented limbs adjusting controls with mechanical precision. Chancellor, while I agree that Outer Rim species tend toward exaggeration, we have received distress signals from 17 different systems in the past standard month. Some of these reports describe the complete disappearance of entire colonies. Dr. Nixera, the Etherian representative, pulsed with skeptical energy patterns. Disappearance is not unusual for primitive settlements. These species barely understand the technology they employ. Most likely, they have experienced catastrophic system failures and are too embarrassed to admit their incompetence. At the far edge of the council chamber, Captain Sarah Chun of the recently contacted Human Federation sat quietly, observing the proceedings with growing unease. Humanity had only been inducted into the Alliance 3 years prior, after their first faster-than-light vessel stumbled into Zephyrian space. Since then, humans had been treated as curiosities at best, their primitive chemical rockets and kinetic weapons the subject of amused condescension among the more advanced species. Sarah had reviewed the same reports that troubled Admiral Crixus, but her analysis painted a far more disturbing picture. The pattern of disappearances, the complete lack of debris or survivors, and the descriptions provided by the few escaped vessels all pointed to something unprecedented in the galaxy's recorded history. If I may, Sarah said, standing from her designated seat in the observer section. The chamber fell silent, surprised that the human representative had dared to speak during formal proceedings. Chancellor Velthok's crystalline features arranged themselves into what might have been amusement. Ah, our human friend wishes to contribute. How delightful. Please, share your primitive perspective on these matters. Sarah felt the condescension wash over her like a cold wave, but she had faced worse challenges during humanity's expansion into space. Chancellor, I've analyzed the distress signals using pattern recognition software developed by our military intelligence division. The rate of expansion, the systematic nature of the attacks, and the complete absence of survivors suggests we're dealing with a highly organized threat that specifically targets technological infrastructure. Fascinating, drawled Counselor Thex of the Meridian Collective, his tentacles writhing with mirth. The species that still burns chemical fuel believes it can interpret galactic threats. Tell me, human, have your people ever encountered anything more dangerous than their own primitive weapons? The council chamber erupted in what passed for laughter among the various species. The Mantarians produced clicking sounds, the Etherians flashed in rapid color sequences, and the Aquarians released streams of bubbles in their environmental suits. Only Admiral Crixus remained silent, his compound eyes focused intently on Sarah's face. Our world has produced numerous extinction-level threats, Sarah replied calmly. Natural disasters, climate shifts, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and yes, wars. We've learned to recognize patterns of escalating danger because survival on Earth required such recognition. Earth, scoffed Dr. Nixera, her energy form pulsing with dismissive frequencies. Yes, we've studied your world. A death world with unstable climate, active geology, and extreme weather patterns. No wonder your species developed such paranoid tendencies. In civilized space, we have evolved beyond such primitive survival instincts. Chancellor Velthak raised one crystalline appendage for silence. While we appreciate the human perspective, we must rely on proven technology and established protocols. Admiral Crixus, I want you to dispatch a single patrol squadron to investigate these reports. Something modest should suffice to calm the Outer Rim populations and demonstrate Alliance presence. Admiral Crixus hesitated. Chancellor, given the scope of the reported incidents, perhaps a full battle group would be more appropriate? Absolutely not, Velthak replied firmly. We will not validate the hysteria of primitive species by overreacting to unsubstantiated claims. A patrol squadron will investigate, file a report, and we can close this matter with appropriate documentation. Sarah Chun watched the proceedings with growing dread. In her hands, she held classified reports from human deep space monitoring stations that painted a picture far worse than anything the Alliance had seen. Her people's primitive radio telescopes had detected the systematic dimming of stars in the affected regions, suggesting something was literally consuming solar energy on a massive scale. But she knew that presenting this information would only result in further mockery. 3 days later, the patrol squadron departed for the Outer Rim. The force consisted of 12 vessels from various Alliance member species, equipped with the most advanced energy shields, plasma weaponry, and quantum communication systems that galactic technology could provide. Commander Xylax of the Hegemony led the expedition, confident that any threat in the Outer Rim could be easily neutralized by superior Alliance firepower. The squadron's destination was the Kepler Nebula region, where 3 different species had reported the complete disappearance of their colonies. The journey through hyperspace took 6 standard hours, during which the crews maintained casual confidence about their mission. Most believed they would find abandoned settlements, possibly the result of equipment failures or administrative incompetence among the primitive Outer Rim species. When the squadron dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, they found empty space where vibrant worlds had once existed. Not destroyed worlds, not asteroid fields, not even debris clouds. Simply nothing. The sensor arrays detected trace quantum signatures suggesting that matter itself had been systematically disassembled at the molecular level. This is impossible, transmitted Commander Xylax to his fleet. Entire planets cannot simply vanish. Our sensors must be malfunctioning. Before his technical officers could respond, the squadron's quantum communication array detected massive gravimetric disturbances approaching from the outer system. What emerged from the darkness defied every principle of known science and technology. The void swarm appeared as a writhing mass of living darkness composed of billions of individual organisms that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. Each creature was roughly the size of a small asteroid, but they moved with coordinated intelligence that suggested a collective consciousness. The Alliance squadron opened fire immediately, their plasma cannons releasing devastating energy beams that could atomize conventional matter. But instead of destroying the approaching swarm, the energy weapons seemed to feed it. The dark creatures absorbed the plasma streams, growing larger and more aggressive with each attack. Within minutes, the swarm had surrounded the entire squadron, and the screaming began over the communication channels. Back on Zephyria Prime, The Alliance Council received the final transmission from Commander Xylax. His voice, distorted by quantum interference, carried absolute terror as he described watching his ships being consumed from the inside out. The creatures had somehow passed through their energy shields without triggering any defensive systems, then systematically dismantled both organic and technological components, while the crews remained conscious throughout the process. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the chamber in tense silence. Around the Alliance base, the Void Swarm continued its relentless advance, consuming technological marvels that had taken millennia to build. But for the first time since the crisis began, there was hope. General Rodriguez turned to address the assembled Alliance representatives. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings, we're about to teach the galaxy that sometimes the best response to advanced threats is primitive solutions applied with extreme prejudice. The war was about to take a very different turn. Deathworlders Unite, the Galaxy Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought Indomitable, watching as the most unlikely fleet in galactic history assembled around her vessel. Ships from dozens of so-called primitive species formed into battle formations that would have seemed chaotic to Alliance tactical doctrine, but possessed a brutal efficiency born from surviving on worlds that actively tried to kill their inhabitants. The Orcish battle cruiser Bloodfang took position on her starboard flank, its hull bristling with kinetic cannons and missile launchers that fired chemically propelled projectiles. Commander Grunt Thok's voice crackled over the communication system, his translated words carrying the savage joy of a warrior finally facing a worthy enemy. Human leader Vasquez, Thok growled, "My clan ships are ready for proper war. These Void Eaters will learn why Grimhold forges the strongest warriors in the galaxy." To port, the reptilian hunter vessels from Pyraxis moved with predatory grace, their ships designed like living creatures with adaptive camouflage systems that relied on physical materials rather than energy fields. Scout Razorclaw hissed his readiness report, his people's natural hunting instincts perfectly suited for the kind of asymmetric warfare that the Void Swarm had never encountered. "The prey thinks itself the hunter," Razorclaw transmitted, his words carrying the cold satisfaction of a professional killer. "My pack will show these entities what true predators can accomplish." Behind the main battle line, supply vessels from the Alliance carried the strangest cargo in military history. Chemical explosives manufactured using techniques that most civilizations had abandoned millennia ago, kinetic weapons that relied on simple mass and velocity, and nuclear warheads that achieved their destructive power through matter conversion rather than energy projection. Elena reviewed the tactical situation with grim determination. Intelligence reports indicated that the Void Swarm had consumed nearly 40% of Alliance space, growing stronger with each technological civilization it absorbed. Their adaptive capabilities meant that conventional energy weapons were now completely ineffective, and their collective intelligence had begun coordinating attacks across multiple sectors simultaneously. "Commander," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, "we're receiving confirmation that the Swarm Queen has established a primary hive structure in the Nexus system. Long-range sensors indicate massive quantum signatures and gravitational distortions consistent with a central command node." "Good," Elena replied. "If we can cut off the head, maybe the rest of the swarm will lose coordination." Status report on our unconventional allies. The alliance of Deathworld species had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Word had spread through the galaxy's forgotten corners about species that were actually fighting back against the Void Swarm. Civilizations that the Alliance had dismissed as barbaric or primitive were revealing combat capabilities that made them invaluable allies in this new kind of war. The Farine packs from the ice world Frostmourne brought expertise in environmental warfare, their ships capable of operating in conditions that would disable most advanced vessels. The Silicon-based collective from the high-radiation moons of Zirion contributed knowledge of energy-resistant materials and construction techniques that could withstand the swarm's absorption attacks. Most importantly, each species brought weapons and tactics that the Void Swarm had never encountered. The swarm's adaptive evolution had been shaped by millions of years of encountering energy-based technologies. They had never faced enemies that relied on chemical reactions, kinetic impacts, or the kind of brutal close-quarters combat that Deathworld species considered normal. All vessels. Elena announced on the fleet-wide communication channel, "We are approaching the Nexus system. Intelligence indicates the Swarm Queen has established her primary hive around the former Alliance research station. Our objective is simple: get close enough to deliver nuclear payloads directly to the hive structure." "Commander," interrupted the voice of Chancellor Velthawk from the Alliance coordination vessel, "surely we should attempt communication one more time. Perhaps some accommodation can be reached." Elena felt a surge of frustration that she kept out of her voice. "Chancellor, with respect, the Queen made her intentions clear. She views all technological civilizations as resources to be consumed. The only language she understands is force." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system, and the sight that greeted them defied description. What had once been a star system containing 7 planets and a massive research facility had been transformed into something that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The Swarm Queen's hive structure stretched across millions of kilometers, composed of living darkness that pulsed with absorbed energy from countless consumed civilizations. Individual swarm entities swarmed around the hive like antibodies protecting a massive organism. Each creature was the size of a battlecruiser, but they moved with organic fluidity that suggested they were more alive than mechanical. As the Deathworld fleet approached, the entities began to coalesce into attack formations. "Contact," announced Scout Razorclaw as his hunters engaged the outer perimeter, initiating harassment protocols. The reptilian ships moved like their namesakes, striking at individual swarm entities with kinetic harpoons and chemical explosive charges before retreating into the sensor shadows of destroyed asteroids. The swarm entities, accustomed to absorbing energy attacks, found themselves taking actual damage from weapons that relied on simple physical trauma. Commander Thok led the Orcish assault with characteristic directness. Bloodfang Squadron, Ram Speed, show these Void Eaters how warriors of Grimhold conduct war. The Orcish vessels accelerated toward the swarm formation, their reinforced hulls designed to survive the kind of impacts that would destroy conventional ships. As they closed with the enemy, they fired kinetic projectiles at point-blank range while simultaneously ramming individual swarm entities. The collisions were devastating for both sides, but the Orcs had been bred on a world where survival required accepting massive casualties to achieve victory. Elena watched the battle develop with professional interest. The swarm entities were adapting to the kinetic attacks faster than expected, their bodies beginning to harden against physical impact. But they couldn't adapt fast enough to counter the sheer variety of weapons and tactics that the Deathworld Alliance was employing. "Farine Pax, initiate ice protocols," she ordered. The vessels from Frostmourne released clouds of supercooled material that began crystallizing around the swarm entities. The creatures, adapted to absorbing energy, had no defense against having their molecular structure locked into rigid crystal matrices. Dozens of entities found themselves trapped in ice that their absorption abilities couldn't process. "Now," Elena commanded, "all vessels converge on the hive structure. Nuclear warheads armed and ready." The Deathworld fleet pushed through the swarm's defensive perimeter, taking horrific casualties but maintaining their momentum through sheer determination. Ships were destroyed, crews were lost, but the survivors pressed forward with the grim certainty of beings who had evolved on worlds where retreat meant extinction. The Swarm Queen's voice resonated through space itself as the attackers approached her hive. "Impossible. Your weapons are primitive. Your technologies are obsolete. How do you resist absorption?" "Because we learned to survive without depending on technology," Elena replied over the open channel. "Our worlds taught us that sometimes the solution to advanced problems is simple brutality applied with extreme prejudice." The nuclear warheads detonated simultaneously around the hive structure, creating localized space-time distortions that the Queen's consciousness couldn't absorb or redirect. The explosions didn't rely on energy projection, but on matter conversion, fundamentally altering the quantum structure of space around the hive. The Swarm Queen's scream of pain and rage echoed across the galaxy as her primary consciousness node was severely damaged. Around the hive, individual swarm entities began losing coordination, their collective intelligence disrupted by the destruction of their central command structure. Secondary objective, Elena announced, all vessels with remaining ordnance target the coordination nodes. We need to fragment their command structure completely. The battle continued for 18 hours, with Deathworld vessels systematically destroying the quantum relay points that allowed the swarm to function as a collective intelligence. Each successful strike further reduced the swarm's coordination, turning a unified threat into billions of individual predators that could be dealt with using conventional tactics. When the shooting finally stopped, the Nexus system contained only debris and the slowly dissipating remains of the Queen's hive structure. Across the galaxy, swarm entities began attacking each other as their collective intelligence fragmented into competing factions. Chancellor Velthawk's voice came over the communication channel, filled with awe and gratitude. Commander Vasquez, General Rodriguez, representatives of the Deathworld Alliance, the Galactic Alliance owes you a debt that can never be repaid. How can we possibly thank you? Elena looked around her battle-scarred bridge at the crew members who had proven that human determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Chancellor, we don't want thanks. We want equality. The galaxy just learned that survival skills matter more than advanced technology when facing existential threats. General Rodriguez's voice joined the conversation from his command vessel. The old Alliance treated Deathworld species as primitives because we didn't develop the same technologies you did. But we developed something more important, the ability to adapt, improvise, and overcome when conventional solutions fail. In the months that followed the Battle of Nexus, the Galactic Alliance underwent fundamental restructuring. Species that had once been dismissed as barbaric or primitive were granted full membership and leadership roles. The Alliance military doctrine was revised to include kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, and the kind of asymmetric tactics that Deathworld species had perfected through necessity. Humanity established the Earth Defense Academy, where Alliance species could learn the survival skills that had made the difference against the Void Swarm. The curriculum included courses on improvisation under pressure, resource management in hostile environments, and the psychological preparation needed to face extinction-level threats. Commander Elena Vasquez became the first human to hold the rank of Alliance Fleet Admiral, tasked with developing new military doctrines that combined advanced technology with the brutal practicality that had saved the galaxy. Under her leadership, the Alliance military prepared for future threats with the understanding that sometimes the best response to advanced problems was primitive solutions applied with deadly effectiveness. The galaxy had learned that survival wasn't about having the most advanced technology or the most sophisticated weapons. Survival was about adaptation, determination, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect what mattered most. In the end, the children of Deathworlds had saved the children of Paradise, proving that evolution forged in the crucible of hostile environments produced exactly the skills needed to face the impossible. The Void Swarm had taught the galaxy an important lesson. No matter how advanced the civilization became, there would always be threats that required going back to basics. And when that time came, the galaxy would be ready, thanks to the species that had never forgotten how to survive.